Hello and welcome to the Should You Buy for the WZ-120-1G FT. Now this is the newest tank in the premium shop right now from Wargaming, and I have offered us 4 bundles, usually it's 3. It's time we get a 4th bundle here, and we can go ahead and see what these bundles have to offer us. Now we have the basic bundle here, which is $45.99. Of course, you get the WZ and you get a garage slot. You have the loaded bundle, which is $61.99, and you get the WZ, you get a garage slot, you get binoculars, a camouflage net, a large caliber gun rammer, 14 days of premium time, and 1,000 gold. Next, we have the ultimate bundle, which is $74.99. We have the WZ, a garage slot, we have binoculars, a camouflage net, large caliber gun rammer, 3,000 gold, 1,500,000 credits, 25 large repair kits. We get a multiplier of 5 XP for the first 20 wins in the WZ, which is always a nice addition when they do that kind of thing. And then lastly, we have the Supreme Bundle, which is $99.99. And for that, you are getting the WZ, a garage slot, binoculars, camouflage net, large caliber gun rammer, 30 large repair kits, 30 personal reserves of plus 50% credits for 1 hour. 30 personal reserves of plus 200% crew XP for 2 hours, 30 personal reserves of plus 50% tank XP for 2 hours. You're getting 4,000 gold, you're getting 2 million credits, and a multiplier of 5 XP for the first 50 wins in the WZ, which will definitely add up very quickly, especially if you're running some of these personal reserves. This multiplier of 5 is going to be astronomical. So let's go ahead and transition over to good old Tanks GG here and see what exactly the WZ is all about. I have a comparison set up to compare this tank to some other tanks that I feel are close to the WZ in comparison here. We have the Scorpion G, we have the SU-120-44, which is the premium Tier 7 Soviet tank destroyer. And of course, we have the SU-120-54, which is the Soviet Tier 9 tank destroyer in the tech tree. It is a non-premium. So let's go into it here. We have the DPM of the WZ, which is 2,809. We have the Scorpion G, which has 2,513. We have the 44, which is 3,050. And of course, we have the 54, which is 3,128. Now that is a very, very high number for any tank destroyer. Next we have the penetration. The WZ has 248. The Scorpion G has 246. Of course the 44 here has 175 because it's running that standard Soviet 122 millimeter we all know. And the 54 has 258. Now the alpha damage on the WZ and on the 54 are identical at 440. The Scorpion G has the best alpha damage at 490. And of course the Soviet SU-120-44 has 390. Now another note is that the WZ has a fire rate of 6.3, where the Scorpion G has a 5.1. The 44 has a 7.8 and the 54 has a 7.1. Also, the WZ has the best shell velocity at 1,000 compared to something like the Scorpion G, which has 920, or the 54 at 940, or lastly we have the 44 at a kind of derpy 800. Also, this tank does equip 35 pieces of ammunition, so you can go ahead and carry a vast or diverse loadout on this tank and make that very, very workable for you in almost any situation. Next, we're going to go ahead and look at the gun handling. The aim time of the WZ is 2.7. The Scorpion has a fantastic 2.0. The 44 has a 2.7 as well, and the 54 has a 2.4 second aim time. Now, there's a dispersion on these tanks is kind of mixed in this comparison here. We have the WZ with a 0.35. We have the Scorpion G with a 0.29, which is very good. We have the 44 with a 0.39, which is very Soviet, and we have a 0.34 for the 54. Now, The elevation and depression of these tanks is interesting. The WZ has a 15-degree elevation, the Scorpion G has a 14, and the 44 and 54 have a joint 16 degrees of elevation. Now when it comes to depression, the WZ actually fares decently well in comparison. It has 6 degrees of depression, which is not outstanding by any measure, but at the same time it is very workable and is very nice to have compared to something like 4 degrees for the 54 or the 44. Their 4 degrees are going to be very tough to use, but something like the Scorpion G obviously has them beat at 7 degrees. Now 3 of these TDs in this comparison have a non-traversable turret. So the WZ has 10 degrees left and right gun traverse or gun arc there. The Soviet 44 and the Soviet 54 have a 8 degrees left and 8 degrees right gun arc. And of course the Scorpion G has that awesome turret, so you got that 360. Now in terms of mobility, the WZ actually fares decently well. It has a 50 kilometer forward speed, the Scorpion has a 60, the 44 has a 47.5, and the 54 has a 48. Also the reverse speed on the WZ and on the Scorpion are the best at 20, which is nice when you're trying to go ahead and sneak around a corner, fire those shots, and back up. This is going to be very helpful compared to something like a 13 kilometer speed in reverse, like on the 44 or 14 on the 54. That's going to be a little bit more difficult to use and play with. Now when it comes to power to weight ratio, the WZ has a 16.1, which is very workable. It's very manageable. This tank seems a lot more mobile than what it actually shows on paper here. I gotta say, this tank is very, very mobile and very nice to play. The Scorpion G has a 17 power to weight ratio. The 44 has a 15.2. And the 54 has the best at 18.8. As you can see here, the terrain resistances are not bad at all for the WZ. In fact, on the Scorpion, they are definitely much worse on all terrain types. So that kind of gives the edge to the WZ, even though the Scorpion has somewhat better power to weight ratio. The hull traverse of the WZ is 43.8, which is the joint best in this comparison with the 44. And as you can see, the 54 has a 41.7. And lastly, we have the Scorpion with a 31.8. But remember, the Scorpion does have that turret, so it has an additional 18 if you were to include that turret into the traverse factor here. Let's go ahead and look at the armor and hit points of these tanks. The WZ has 120 millimeters on the front, 80 at the sides, and 45 at the rear. The Scorpion G has 30 on the front, 16 at the sides, and 20 at the rear. This tank is paper. If you have this tank or you ever fired this tank, you know that it does not bounce hardly anything unless you're just extremely lucky or you're track seat it. The 44 has 90 at the front, 75 at the sides, and 45 at the rear. The 54 has 100 at the front, 80 at the sides, and 45 at the rear. Now, in terms of hit points, the WZ has 1,100, the Scorpion has 1,150, and it's going to need all those if it's looking to take any kind of shots. And the 44 has 840, followed by the 54 at 1,530, as it is a tier 9. A quick note is that the view range on the WZ is a rather decent 380, where you compare it to something like the Scorpion G that has 360, and you straight outclass it in terms of view range, especially if we're to add those binos or that coated optic on there for that additional view range. Also, the WZ has a 12% chance of catching fire, which means that you could go ahead and train up your crew in firefighting and lose that fire extinguisher and replace it with a consumable that would be quite beneficial to the crew. Now I want to show you guys exactly what the WZ has to offer here. Now this is the tank exactly as you buy it, straight from the premium shop. You have, of course, the 2800 DPM and the rest of the stats which we have already ran through. Here, I wanted to go ahead and show you guys the 3D model of the WZ here to give you guys a better idea of the armor scheme and what we're looking at as far as the bouncing potential here on this tank. The upper glacis on this tank is not too bad. It is 120 millimeters thick, but it's also angled at around 52 degrees. which gives this tank an effective armor rating of about 200 to 220 depending on where you're shooting it here. Now, the lower plate is less armored. It is 80 millimeters, and it is also angled at about 52 degrees, which equals about 130 millimeters of effective armor on the lower plate, which means that if you're going to go ahead and fire at this tank, even if you're a tier 6, then this is definitely the place you want to go ahead and fire your rounds. The lower plate is not really going to bounce hardly anything. Now let's go ahead and use the 6 degrees of gun depression here to its full advantage here, so you guys can get an idea of what this tank looks like if it was to use the 6 degrees of gun depression here. And you can see that the plate, the upper glacis here, increases quite substantially. So now we're at about 230 all the way up to, of course, about 260 millimeters on the upper glacis here. But that also makes your lower glacis a much easier target if they're able to go ahead and fire shots into that. Kind of keep that in mind if you guys are able to go ahead and use your gun depression here. You will increase your armor thickness and your potential to bounce shots coming in at you. Also, another quick note is that the gun mantlet on this, it's about 120 millimeters thick, which can give you in the range of 300 to 400 millimeters of armor. Also, the ring around the outside is 160 millimeters, giving that additional potential to bounce those shots off the ring if they're aiming at that. Additionally, this tank does have a track link right here just below the gun, and it does add a decent amount of armor. That's about 20 millimeters. So what that means is that if for some reason the enemy is firing at you, they manage to hit this, it will go ahead and increase that chance of bouncing. And as you see here, it adds obviously 20 millimeters. Now I wanted to go ahead and give you guys basically what this tank can look like if it was outfitted with equipment and crew skills. So let's go ahead and go through that so you guys can see the potential that this tank does have. For equipment, I do have the ventilation, I have coated optics, and I have a gun rammer. Now this is more of a aggressive TD style. This is kind of like a second line TD here. So you'll be keeping up with the mediums and basically providing that additional firepower when possible. So let's go ahead and look at the crew skills. I do have Brothers in Arms, I have off-road driving for the driver, I have snapshot for the gunner, I have situational awareness for the commander as he is also the radio man, and of course I have safe stowage for the loader. So what that offers in terms of DPM is almost 500 extra DPM. The reload time is 8.0 compared to the 9.4 that this tank has normally. Also, the rate of fire is 7.49, which is much better than the 6.38 that it has originally. Your aim time also is decreased to 2.6. Your dispersion is also decreased to 0.34, which will help out with that. Now, this is what I was talking about with the snapshot. Basically, snapshot does factor into TDs without turrets when it comes to the gun traverse. That's the way I hear it. It makes you that much more accurate when your gun is traversing, when you're aiming onto a target. Obviously, the horsepower per ton did drop because of the addition of the equipment, but that is somewhat made up for by the increase in the terrain resistances. So basically, your terrain resistances are better across the board due to the ventilation and due to the Brothers in Arms and due to the off-road driving that I have equipped here. So that's going to help out all three of these stats. Also, your tank traverse is increased to help you keep your frontal armor towards the enemy and to go ahead and give you the best chance of ricocheting those shots. An additional note is that the view range has jumped up quite a bit. As you see here, it went from 380, which is the base view range, to 445. So 445 is exactly what you need to have that, and this tank can achieve that with simply the coated optics and the Brothers in Arms here, in addition to the situational awareness. Now, how I would play this tank, basically this tank has two roles that it can go ahead and fulfill very successfully. You have the traditional TD route, which is basically hiding behind bushes, using cover, and using either the spotting ability of this tank or your team to go ahead and spot those targets and then go ahead and destroy them very quickly with the DPM of this tank and the awesome alpha damage that it provides. Or additionally, this tank can be used as a aggressive second line tank destroyer here, so you can basically follow the mediums or the heavies into battle and provide that much needed DPM and alpha damage to your enemies there. Just keep in mind that this tank is not heavily armored. It is decently armored, and it will bounce or ricochet the occasional shot. However, this tank is not to be dependent on this upper structure. This upper glacis here is not to be counted on to bounce shots, especially from 7 through 10. This tank is more than likely not going to bounce a shot unless you kind of know what's firing at you. So just keep that in mind. As far as picking up or purchasing this tank, at the end of the day, that is your decision. However, I will say after playing this tank a decent amount, I will say that this tank is very mobile. It's very fun to play. It provides crew training from tier 2 to tier 10 in the tech tree, Chinese tank destroyer line. So basically, if you were to drop a crew in here that's on your tier 2 all the way up to tier 10, it will train that crew completely. It does train all crew members. All tanks have 4 crew members, which is exactly what this tank has. So you will be able to train those crews up very quickly. This tank does make a substantial number of credits and XP. I would recommend buying this tank if you're looking into grinding down the Chinese TD line. When you compare the prices of this to something like the Jagdtiger, obviously this tank is a lot more player friendly to play, and I would recommend this to the majority of players as long as you kind of fulfilled either 1 or 2 tank destroyer roles I mentioned earlier. So with that said, guys, thank you for watching, and I will catch you guys next time.